Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Now tell me something, hand on your heart. Which journalist ever tells you before starting a story that what I have is a non-story? It is not a story. Journalists would usually say, this is an exclusive. This is a world exclusive. I was told this by a very reliable source. It was whispered into my ear. It's an earth-shaking story, a scoop, a mega scoop, scoop of scoops. The world is turning inside out. Or the bottom has fallen off the rupee, or the rupee is in free fall. Mr. Modi, Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, Modi government, what are you doing? The rupee is in free fall. Now, this is precisely what the BJP under Narendra Modi then, who was then the prime ministerial candidate, was telling UPA too that all the same things. Bottom has fallen off the rupee. What is happening? India's prestige is being ruined. The same things can be said by different people at different times. Then why is it that I say that I have a non-story? Look at this graphic. The graphic will tell you why this is a non-story. If you see this graphic, see it on your screen. See, it starts actually in 1985, which is a silly place for us to start because 1985, the value of the rupee as to dollar was fully controlled. So the market price was one thing, bank price was something else. Beginning 1985, all the data we use is for calendar years. It begins on 1st of January of that year, ends on 31st of December that year. If you see 1985, it begins with the bank value of the rupee at 1236. That I'm quite sure if you went out to the marketplace as in the real marketplace. In Delhi, you could go to Chandni Chowk, you go to the Jama Masjid area, you could go to Daryaganj, or everybody's favorite place then used to be Janpath, the back lanes of Janpath, or there were some money changers there who would do it quite openly, and the back lanes of Connaught Place. You will find that you will be able to buy a dollar for about 17, 18 rupees. That was then seen to be the real value. That's why while this graphic begins at 1985, and there is a reason we are beginning this at 1985, it begins at 1985, that value really doesn't matter because that wasn't the real value. When does the rupee start to acquire a real value? Real value means when it's generally, rupee has never been in a free float, even today it's not in a free float, but generally when it became sort of market denominated is the summer of 1991. Two devaluations were carried out by Dr. Manmohan Singh in the run-up to the economic reform, the first budget and the economic reform on the 1st and the 3rd July of 1991, the first was 9% devaluation, the second was 11% devaluation. So 20% devaluation was carried out at that point. Remember, in India's history, at least the history beginning 1960, in the last 65 years, two devaluations have been carried out. One was this one by Dr. Manmohan Singh in 1991 on the eve of the budget and the big reform move, and one was by Morarji Desai as finance minister under Mrs. Gandhi as Prime Minister in 1966. That was a devaluation of 57%. That tells you how artificially inflated India's currency was. So I'm also giving you a little bit of our political / economic history as it is linked to the value of the dollar, because this is a fragile nationalism issue in the sense that you tend to get very sensitive about the value of your currency. You can also call it currency nationalism. So you have a testosterone laden view of the value of your currency. That's when in the Modi campaign, many people had said, oh, let the Modi government comes in. When Achhe Din come, then the value of the dollar will fall to 40 rupees from about 70 at that point. And somebody even said it will become 1 rupee to a dollar, right? That is the reason I say there is a nationalistic sentiment attached to the dollar. However, you live in the marketplace. Markets know no nationalism. In fact, markets know no emotion. You might say that markets go up and down with sentiment, right? Stock markets, but that sentiment is also based on fundamentals. Fundamentals and sentiment means I might think that this country or this government or this company is doing so well that I think my sentiment is that to support this, to buy this because it will do well. It is never irrational. So if you see this graphic and you draw a straight line from it, take 1991, mid 1991, and once again for our calculation, we'll take January 1, 1992, because by that time, by July 4, 1991, rupee has found its reasonably correct value or reasonably accurate value after devaluation in mid-July, and that is at about 25 rupees. If you calculate from that point, say 25.92, 25 rupees 92 paisa, the average for 1992, and come now, which is say 86.60, right? You can see that overall decline in the value of the rupee has been 231%. But that said, see what's happened on an annualized basis. This is 39 years. So if you calculate on an annualized basis, it's all compounded, etc., etc. So you just go and hit a formula and calculate. Look at CAGR, which is compounded annual growth rate. Growth is for the value of the dollar, not the value of the rupee. Then it comes to 3.58%. So 3.5% approximately, I would say, is the structural rate of decline, you might call it, in the value of the rupee since economic reform. That's almost exactly why I'm almost, that is 4 decades. Now, if you see this graphic again, it tells you there are no really surprising ups and downs like this, right? This is not a graphic where some prime minister wakes up the wrong side of the bed, somebody starts some wrong policies, somebody even goes close to a war, somebody tests nuclear weapons. Rupee has been very steady. It has been very steady in its decline. And we'll go over some of these political epochs as we go ahead. That's why, first of all, my first point is proved that the story that we have is a non-story. Once again, if you see this graphic, the graphic I have has a lot of scribbles in it. So forget this graphic, forget this version. Even I can't read my handwriting in any case. Read the graphic on your screen. That tells you the graphs like this. Anybody can come to power. The rupee is telling you or dollar is telling you, koi nrip ho, hame kya hani, whoever can be the ruler, it makes no difference to me. That's why it's a non-story. And that's why occasionally when we see these fluctuations, and fluctuations are all mostly in one direction, because when there is a steady principle set, that rupee will decline to the dollar, and there are sound economic reasons why one currency will decline against the other. One is the inflation differential. The inflation differential between the rupee economy, that is India's economy, and say the US economy, where the dollar is printed, dollar is located, because rupee is pegged to the dollar. The second is your current account deficit. So generally, your currency will weaken as a multiple of your current account deficit. Now, different economists have different yardsticks there, but generally it would be said that if your current account deficit is between 2 to 3%, then your currency should depreciate to the dollar between 5 and 6%. That has not been happening with India. It stayed at 3.5%. There are fluctuations in some phases. These phases can be political phases in India, but more likely these are phases in global economics or global monetary situation, and the global growth situation, global movement of capital, etc. It's all very complex. However, the end result is that nothing really abrupt happens with the Indian currency. That's very steady. Now, if you see once again this graphic, take a close look at the graphic, because there are some landmarks noted there. If you see this graphic, the rupee is declining steadily from 1992 up to 2002. This is in spite of the fact between 1996 and 2002, India has seen much instability. Rao government is gone. Those temporary daily wage arrangements have come in, Devagowda and Gujral. And then the nuclear test and the sanctions on India. Then the next year, 1998 was the nuclear test. Look at your graphic and you will see these years. 99 is the war in Kargil. Once again, end of 2001, going right through 2002 is Op Parakram, when India and Pakistan are in a warlike situation. In spite of all of that, rupee has continued to decline, but has continued to decline at its normal pace, of 3.5% per year. None of these really scary events, even the sanctions of 99, have sent the rupee in free fall. In fact, you see what happens after 2002. That's very interesting. After 2002, the value of the rupee actually starts steadying and even picking up a little bit. Now, how does that happen? There are only some periods in these 40 years when the rupee actually starts picking up, not for long, but it does start picking up and also stays steady. So you can say 2002. By that time, one, Vajpayee government has started reforms and very substantive reforms. You have to give them credit. Second, by this time, after 10 years of reform, India's exports have picked up, India's services sector has picked up, global economy is also growing and movement of capital has started, and also a lot of the multinational companies, a lot of the foreign funds have started seeing India as an attractive destination. So a fair bit of foreign exchange flows have started into India. So 2002 onwards, still in the Vajpayee period, the value of the rupee starts appreciating just a little bit, then appreciates a little bit more. And when the UPA inherits it in 2004, this is actually in a good state. Now, the fact is, it's quite ironical, but it's a happy irony that Indian political system, Indian monetary system, Reserve Bank of India, Indian commentariat, Indian public opinion, none of them was used to the idea that rupee could actually stay steady, not weaken and maybe even appreciate. What that meant was that at that point, in terms of the size of India's GDP, it looked like too much dollar was coming in and RBI had too much dollar again as a percentage of the GDP. So what did happen? So I will take you back to Vajpayee government's last action. One of the last actions of the Vajpayee government, probably I think at its last cabinet meeting, 4th of February 2004. What was that action? That is when Vajpayee government, it was a big, massive reform and India's statement of confidence in itself and confidence in its currency to the whole world. Confidence in its currency and also the confidence in its monetary and economic situation. On 4th of February 2004, just before Vajpayee government became a caretaker government and the election campaign started, they notified the LRS scheme. That is the liberalized remittance scheme, whereby every Indian citizen from their tax-paid income can send out X amount of money. At this point, it's $250,000. It's generally been like that, in that range, without any questions asked. This is liberalized. That was one way of saying that, look, we have enough dollars, so don't worry. All this black market in dollars should now vanish. You can go, you can spend money overseas, you can buy bonds overseas, you can buy properties overseas, as long as you're making the right disclosures, making these payments, these payouts through regular banking channels and following all the necessary rules. So that I count as one of the biggest reforms of Vajpayee government, also a big statement of confidence. Subsequent governments have all retained that policy. That is India's statement of confidence in its currency. In fact, it was around that time that I had gone to meet Chandrasekhar, who was a former Prime Minister. He was very, very sick by that time, fighting with very bad cancer in his home in South Avenue. And just talking philosophically, he said to me, "Arey bhai, kya samay badal gaya hai? How times have changed. एक समय था हमारे होते होते ही इतनी विदेशी मुद्रा की कमी थी. We were so short of foreign exchange in my time that I had to take out gold by the plane load to prevent a default by India." That is when he was Prime Minister. In the brief period, pre-Narasimha Rao period in 1991. That's when India's gold was taken out to prevent a default on our foreign payments. He said एक वो स्थिति थी और अब 10-11 साल के बाद ऐसी स्थिति है कि इतना ज़्यादा डॉलर हो गया है कि हमें उसको बाहर भेजना पड़ रहा है. And now we come to a state where we are having to send our dollar outside. So I tell you this story and take you back to 2004 and beyond that to tell you that nothing's happened to the dollar in these 40 years, including now, that should create such a big anxiety. Now I know that today there is some alarmism. I see this new research by Gavical Research Organization, which I very often follow and many of us follow for its research on China. The research on China is very sound. And they say that, look, in the year of 2024, Indian rupee had fallen 3% compared to the dollar. But while it had depreciated 3%, it had still outperformed all the emerging market currencies. So the emerging market currency index, India has outperformed. Indian rupee had weakened less than other emerging markets. That is true. Right now, it looks like that decline has gathered some pace, but that's okay. It would look still manageable. They say that if this goes on, then India may end up 2025 at 90 rupees to a dollar. But remember, even if India ends up at 90 rupees to a dollar, the decline will be just over 3.5%. So in 1 year, you can be a little bit here and a little bit there. Last year was just 3%. And once again, if you average it all out across any sizable period, you might still end up in that range of 3.5% decline per year. That's the reason, once again, I said I have a story for you, but it's a non-story. It's a non-story to the extent that bottom has not fallen off the rupee, that rupee is not in free fall, that we should not all be rushing to the black market to buy dollars and stash them away in bags of sugar or wheat or whatever. Nothing of the sort is needed. God is sitting in the heaven and all is fine with the world of our currency. However, there is an adjustment right now and it looks like RBI has also stopped intervening in this. Maybe they were not very wise to have intervened. This Gavical research also says that the RBI has spent about $50 billion to try and support the rupee at a certain level. And they say there was a notional or psychological level fixed at 85. That was breached on 23rd of December, and after that doesn't look like RBI has intervened. Now, I've said this before also that the RBI is now short by about 60 to 70 billion dollars over the peak they had earlier this year. I also want to clarify to you that all of this cannot be or in fact is not because they have supported the rupee. Much of it is, but not all of it. There are some other adjustments. For example, as I had said earlier, some of it is also because Indian companies are investing overseas. That's a smaller amount, but a more significant change has also come because of the revaluation of many currencies. Because RBI, like any central bank, does not hold all its reserves in one currency. There is gold, of course. About 60% is held in dollar, but a lot of the reserves, remaining reserves, so dollar plus gold, but the rest is held in other currencies, that is euro, British pound, maybe Swiss franc, etc., Japanese yen. All of those have declined even more against the dollar, and that causes a revaluation effect in RBI's reserves. When you see RBI's reserves having fallen by this much, yes, a significant amount has been used to support the rupee, which probably is not happening today, but some of it is also because of revaluation. And now come back to the same graphic. Graphic will come up on your screens again. See what happens. 2008, you can see the rupee has fallen a bit, not too much, but fallen a bit. This is the global financial crisis. Global financial crisis is when looked like there was a run on many currencies. In Asia, there was big anxiety because Asia had seen the earlier currency crisis, that is 1997, and everybody remembered George Soros, how he got involved, and he then vacuum cleaned many of these countries that tried to support the price or the value of their currency because he stood outside and he kept on shorting it, and he had a war chest. And by October, November of 2008, there were rumors. It wasn't just rumors, it was widely believed in the Indian establishment, also in the RBI, that George Soros was sitting in Dubai with a large war chest to short the Indian rupee versus the dollar in case he thought RBI was willing to support it to keep it to a certain price come what may. That the Indian system, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Chidambaram, RBI were wise not to do, and soon enough some other things were done to shore up India's forex reserves, and things not only stabilized, but you can see that the value of rupee actually started appreciating a little bit. It appreciated a little bit and then it stabilized somewhere there. You can see between 2009 and 2010, the value of rupee has appreciated a little bit, but all a little bit. Once again, if you draw a line anywhere between decades, it will be about 3.5%. That is the key thing. That's what makes it a non-story. Then you come to the other turning point. That is 2016, demonetization and its aftermath. You can see almost nothing happens. Almost nothing happens because demonetization has nothing to do with India's exports. It maybe does cause a little bit of concern. It causes a little bit of concern with foreigners bringing in money, but only for a very short while, because the basic direction of India's economy is good. India's economy is growing. There is, in fact, after an immediate little knock, appreciation in the rupee, just a little bit, and once again the same steady graph downwards starts. Now you can see this graph any which way. If you want to see it this way as I have shown you, that tells you how many rupees you need to buy a dollar. You can reverse this graph if that suits you, because that looks like going up, but what's going up is not going up, it's actually going down. The rupee is going down. You can reverse this graph and see this. That will tell you how many dollars a rupee can buy, right? So it means the same thing, but just for clarity of understanding, once again, there is a straight line, steady line like this. Indian rupee will decline against the dollar at about 3.5 to 3.6% per year. Some years it will be more, some years it will be less, some years you might even see an appreciation. I will now take you through some of the other interesting insights there. If you so wish, you can see this in decadal terms. So decade of the 80s, we are beginning with 1985, say average of 12.36. That really has no meaning because that was a control price, so forget it. You can toss it. Say, I'll call it the decade of the 15s, irrelevant 15s, because that was government mandated price. Then come to the 90s. Come to the 90s, starting with 1992. That is where 91 you've started with 17.49. That is before the devaluation. But when you look at the value after the devaluation, just over 25 rupees, that decade has ended at 44.94. What that means that there's been a steady decline in that decade. Then you come to the next decade, 2000 to 2010. This is an incredible decade. And this you can see on our big graphic also. You start at 44.94 in 2000 and you end up with 45.72 in 2010. Calendar years, starting 1st of January, ending 31st of December. Now, who are you going to give credit to? Because some of this period was under Vajpayee government, the rest was under UPA. So if UPA says, oh, we managed the economy so well that for the first time for a certain period, since the opening up in 1991, the rupee actually appreciated or remained steady, they can say so. But at the same time, the BJP would say that of this period, for about 4 years, for three and a half years, we were there, the BJP was there. And it was the reform that the BJP carried out between Jaswant Singh and Yashwant Sinha that also contributed to it. And again, going by straight decades, not political epochs, 2010 to 2020 decade, the rupee started at 45.72, ended up at 74.09, right? Again, the big graphic will tell you. And then from 2020 to now, which is 12th of January 2025, it has gone from 74.09 to 86.50. Once again, there is no real drama there. Let me therefore summarize this for you. Post-liberalization, from 1st of January 1992 to December 31, 1995, overall decline in the value of the rupee, 25%, 25.09%, 25%. 1st January 1999 to 31st December 2003, declined by 8.21%. So you can say, oh, Vajpayee government, I've deliberately chosen Vajpayee government and dropped those other 2-3 years between Gowda, Gujarat, etc. If you see that, looks like rupee is now much steadier than before. That's because the benefits of the earlier reform are now kicking in. Then come to UPA1. UPA1, again we are calculating calendar years. 1st January 2004 to 31st December 2008, rupee has actually appreciated by 4%. Now you know how smart Bajpayee government was to have started that LRS scheme, that rupee is appreciating, more and more dollars are coming in. One, let Indians park some money overseas, give your population confidence and give the world confidence that this India is now sure of its currency. This India no longer has to lock up its currency in a vault with a regulatory fortress of tall, strong walls. Rupee is now, we have the confidence to let the rupee go out in the market. In spite of that LRS and in spite of the government allowing Indian companies to invest a lot of money overseas, the value of the rupee went up 4% in those 5 years. That's a very unusual epoch in India's history. Then UPA 2, it reversed between 1st January 2009 and 31st December 2013. Rupee came back to its normal rate of fall. So it fell overall by 21.06%. NDA 1, Modi NDA 1, Jan 2014 to 31 December 2018, fell by 12.06%. Again, a little bit lower than the historic average and definitely lower than UPA 2. NDA 2, however, Modi NDA 2, the rupee decline starts inching up to its historic level of about 3.5% per year. That is 17.29% value fall over these 5 years. And since then, in about 12 months, you've seen a fall of 2.62% already, and chances are we are heading towards sustaining. Again, we'll exchange notes at the end of NDA 3. Chances are that the rupee depreciation will average out again at around 3.5-3.6%. Once again, going back to the non-story. Now, I know that everybody likes comparisons. Everybody likes comparisons and people like political comparisons. So if we just take a dumb comparison, 10 years of UPA, 2 terms of UPA and 10 years of Modi government, we are not taking the 11th year now. See the comparisons. 10 years of UPA, the rupee lost value overall of 29.31% at an average rate of 2.58% per year. 10 years of NDA, that is 1st January 2014 to 31st December 2023, the rupee lost 35.34% value at 3.53% per year. So in fact, it was higher, significantly higher than the rate of decline in the 10 years of UPA. Now, how do you explain that? It's easy to explain because the first 5 years of UPA was really the golden period for the rupee. They may not have done very much to deserve that credit, but the fact that the rupee not only did not decline in the first 5 years of UPA, but actually appreciated in value. Now, there were many factors at play at that point. The biggest factor being that the global growth was booming. Global growth was moving. There was a lot of capital moving to emerging markets. Emerging markets were the hot thing those days. And even when the global financial crisis came, the rich countries started printing money and distributing it. Central banks in rich countries, in fact, carried out many rounds of easing. So a lot of foreign exchange became available in the marketplace and it was searching for places to go to. India became one of those places. So once again, if you see all this, the reason I've explained all of this to you is that we understand that really, as far as currency value is concerned, there is very little politics to it. There is very little politics to it. And whether the currency goes up a little bit or continues to go down at a steady pace is not a political event. However, anytime something like this happens, a few days or a few weeks of fall happens, there will be politics. People will talk politics. And finally, I started out by saying, this is a non-story. Why did I say so? That's because every day I wake up and say, newspapers, rupee at its lowest ever, for heaven's sake. Because rupee is always declining. Every day it will be at the lowest ever. There might be the odd day when it goes up. There might be the odd 3 months it goes up. There might even be the odd 5 years, like 2005 to 2010. There might even be odd 5 years when it goes up a little bit. But usually it will only go down. That's why every day's currency rates, every time the rupee loses a paisa, 2 paisa, anything, you could still say, and you would still say, rupee is at its historic low, because the direction is only one way. It only goes lower and lower and lower. That's how life works. And that's why the most ridiculous headline that I see day after day after day is that rupee at its historic low.